You know, I've been trying to figure out why what happens to Arthur impacted me so badly. I've seen video game characters die that I loved before. It's not uncommon to have a favorite or beloved fictional character die, and the thing is, they're fictional, so even when it hurts, it's like, okay, well, that was good writing right there. That's why that hurt, but I can move on because they aren't real. But while I felt for them before, I've never cried, which is something that is new and different for Red Dead Redemption 2. With the exception of Lee from The Walking Dead, but even in that situation, I only shed a few tears, and I was more crying for his and Clementine's situation rather than for their individual characters. But here I sobbed, and it was purely for Arthur. It was purely for his character and everything that had been built up to us about him prior to that point. And that's notable for me because I haven't cried in 2 years prior to crying for this. I'm not a big crier. I go long periods of time without crying, but the floodgates opened with this game. Purely because he's the most phenomenal character I've ever seen. What we're presented with Arthur Morgan is a strong, loyal man whose security in who and what he is slowly being shaken. It's being shaken from outside of the gang by the rapidly changing face of the US, and it's being shaken from inside of the gang from the rapidly changing inner workings. And we can get a better understanding of the fact that this is something that not only matters to him, but kind of bothers him. And we can gather that from journal entries, confessional conversations, normal conversations, and just what we see and hear out in the world that he interacts with. Arthur's written well enough to react to all these things in the way that an actual person would. And as the game goes on, we see him try to ignore his feelings on things and push forward with his duties, that is, until he gets sick. And facing certain death rather than just the possibility of it opens his eyes in ways that they were either partially open or just fully closed to prior to that. That's when his character development up until that point becomes glaringly obvious to the player, and I have to say that due to great writing that it really doesn't stop there. The strength we're shown in game, his size, his demeanor, his history, his position in the gang, it slowly dwindles as time goes on, and it's painful to watch. It hurts. You try to feed him, he's coughing, his eyes are watery, he can't keep his weight up. It hurts to see this guy that you've come to care about as a character, and also that through actions like having to bathe him and feed him and getting and having to shave him and take care of his hair and even changing his outfits, it's almost like you were taking care of a child you really care about. And then you see he gets diagnosed, and you see him slowly degrading, and there's nothing you can do about it, and it hurts. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to hear him cough. It's frustrating to hear NPCs comment on his illness. And you, as a modern person, a person of the modern world, playing this game, there's nothing you can do, or that even can really be done at the time for tuberculosis. So you just have to accept it. It's kind of funny because when I was in the 6th grade, my writing teacher told me that if you really want to write a sad story, or a story that gets your audience really into the journey of your character, that you're kind of going to have to treat your characters like you hate them. Even if you love them, you have to treat them as you're writing them like you hate them. The fabric of Rockstar's souls must be imprinted with this advice. It must be comprised of that advice. kidding, they don't have souls. Now I want to talk a little bit about the ending, and by a little bit, I mean I want to talk a lot about the ending. I first want to get into 4 particular characters that you interact with, or you can interact with, towards the end. Because this is just another testament to how good Rockstar's writing is, but I didn't expect these characters to matter so much. And it wasn't until after I'd beat the game that I realized why their interactions with Arthur stood out to me the most, and why I kept returning in my head to their characters and thinking about their conversations. And it's because they humanized him in a way that I didn't expect. In a way that I thought he already was humanized to me. I already found him relatable in some aspects, and even in aspects where I didn't, I felt for him. So I didn't think that he needed to be humanized any further, but I realized I was very wrong, because these particular 4 characters did an excellent job of showing me the areas in which he hadn't quite yet been humanized. The first character is Hamish Sinclair. And when you first come across him, he's missing his leg, and I'm thinking, okay, I didn't even realize that he was an actual notable character. I figured he was one of those people that need you, I don't know, suck off the poison, or can go to Maine and bring me a rock lobster back, I'm hungry. Like, just these ridiculous requests that strangers will have for you in the wilderness. And then it occurred to me, okay, he's getting a cutscene, he's more important than that. And I didn't really know what to expect with this guy. I thought he was just going to be, I don't know, I was just using him to prolong the game, because at that point you're getting close to the end and you realize what's coming. So I was just doing any and everything I could to put off that ending. So I wasn't really anticipating how important of a character Hamish was going to be. And it wasn't even until I read Arthur's journal that I even further realized how important of a character he was. And Arthur notes how much he respects him, maybe more than anybody he's ever met, because Hamish knows who he is. Like I said earlier in the video, Arthur's identity has been shaken, so him saying this gives a deeper meaning than just a simple shallow observation. And the fact that one thing that stood out to me, I believe it's in the second encounter you have with him. I could be wrong. But Arthur sits there and he just chats with him. He just completely shoots the shit. And about nothing. And that's not something that we really see his character do too much in the game. You know, he's pretty much about his business, very straightforward, wants to get things done, is always, what's our next move? And for him to do that at that time in his life as well, it kind of just shows you the powerful, calming sense of normalcy that Hamish brought about. The next character is Sister Calderon. I don't speak Spanish. I probably pronounced that wrong. I apologize to my Spanish speakers or people that just remember how she pronounced it in the game. But this character, she was incredibly necessary to the game. Let me just say that. Because the entire time that I was playing, I kept wanting to shake Arthur and inform him that morality is not a black and white thing, that it absolutely exists on a spectrum. And while by no means, or by anybody's account, certainly not his own, was he some angel, I don't believe that he was an irredeemable demon either. And he wasn't without his good traits and his good actions. Even if you played purely a low morality run, there are still things about him canonically that speak to his truer traits. it's important to note this because in the idea of redemption, in order to change, you can't settle on the notion that it's impossible or that you're too far gone. You have to be willing to make that long journey back, the path of redemption, and you have to first understand that it's possible to even go about doing that. And that's where the sister comes in. She hears him out without judgment from a religious standpoint or a moral standing. She gives him an honest viewpoint that we're all flawed, none of us are without sin, and she treats him like nothing short of another human being in every interaction, and he needed that. You can tell. He leaves each interaction with her better than he walked into it, which speaks to the type of character that she is. And she must have been another character that had a profound impact on him, because if you play a run with decent morality, he confides in her about his son. And as far as I know, she's the only character besides Rains Falls that he does that with. And it clearly is something that is close to his heart and that he hasn't fully processed, and something that's weighing on his mind at the end of his life. So it's an important piece of him that we don't even really hear him discussing with people that he trusts. And he not only confides in that deep, important piece of information about himself, but also about his illness. And he confides in her about it in a way that he doesn't do for anybody else. He doesn't discuss it in that detail, really, with anybody else besides her. And he finally admits what the player, or at least myself, could only have imagined at that point, which is that he's afraid. And he's nothing short of properly humanized in his last interaction with her. Now, Charlotte, I really enjoyed her character for a lot of reasons, but since this isn't a review, I won't go too deep into it, but I thought that she was a really fascinating character to have such short interactions with her, but have them all be meaningful. Again, it just goes back to that great writing skill of Rockstar, but she was interesting, one, because I didn't really expect her. I didn't know hadn't really explored that area at that point of the game, so I didn't really know what they would have of me up there. But two, because what I thought was going to be a simple rescue mission and maybe just check back in on her and bring her some food or something like that, actually turned out to be way more than that. Through interactions with her, we're able to see what a normal life, just a glimpse, would have been for Arthur. If he could have found a good woman, if he could have just found his own space in the world, and just have been allowed to be normal. And it hurts so bad that you see that at that stage in the game, because you know he's not getting that. He's not going to even come close to that. And it hurts. And I wanted so badly in the game for him to just go gather his things from camp and just go live out his remaining days with her and not sacrifice himself one more second for those selfish assholes at the camp. But that wasn't in the cards. And she was one of the few prominent NPCs that didn't just take from him, but gave back in a way that felt equal. She did request something of him, but she gave as much as she got, and she just treated him so decently. And you could even see when he was there, when he was around her, again, it was one of those interactions, like interacting with the sister or interacting with Hamish, where he left better than he went in. The last character on this short list is Rains Falls. And I thought that it was important to note his character for several reasons. One was the first thing that stood out to me, and that was his first conversation with Arthur comes right after Dutch has already started getting in his son's ear. Now, he doesn't owe Arthur anything to start with, but certainly not when he's a part of the gang of the man who's leading his son's life to ruin, leading his tribe to ruin. He could have easily held him accountable for running with said man. But instead, he hears him out. And then not only does he hear him out, but he offers to go out of his way to help him find some herbs to help him with his cough. That's especially touching because no one else offered this to that man. No one. Not even the people that he called family. No one in camp offers to do anything of the sort for him. Many barely want to, or even do, acknowledge that he's sick without him telling them. There's very few of the camp characters, the gang characters, that realize he's sick and care, or that he doesn't have to tell first. Very few. I think, Sadie and Charles are the only ones that really showed some genuine concern and compassion about his illness. I could be wrong. But from what I recall, that's how it was, because I remember thinking that way at the end of the game, and interacting with Rains Falls is what made me think of that. The fact that random NPCs in the game, who don't really know your character too well, if they know him at all, will comment that he doesn't look good, that he looks sick. But everybody is so selfishly tied up in their own little game at the camp that this man who's done everything for them, given them everything, is not firing on all cylinders, is barely scraping by on one, and they just don't really seem to care. It was touching, and it really gave you a nice introduction to the type of character that we learn Rains Falls to be. And maybe this is why Arthur opened up to him about something we didn't really know about prior to this conversation. Prior to his conversation with Rains Falls, we didn't know that he had a son named Isaac, or that he had a girl that he obviously had an encounter with named Eliza, who was the child's mother. And in his conversation with Rains Falls, we see that their death isn't something that Arthur really dealt with, though it shook him to his core. Like, it definitely had a profound impact on him, but he didn't deal with it properly. And it's not something he clearly talks about very much, if at all. So for him to talk to a stranger about it over those that he considers to be his family is noteworthy. Reflecting on all of these characters made me realize two main reasons why I personally wasn't satisfied with the ending. They made me see what Arthur could have been if he wasn't raised in the life of an outlaw, and Rockstar did an amazing job saving their interactions, or at least certain interactions with them, until you were deep in your emotions and you were analyzing everything and everyone that you came across. But I personally believe they also dropped the ball for a seriously satisfying ending that didn't upend everything that they'd built up over the course of the game, but still would have given Arthur the proper end. Now, hear me out, because I want to make it very clear that I'm not asking for some ex machina cure that didn't exist to come swooping in and whisk him off to Tahiti. I recognize that perhaps these characters wouldn't be as impactful on me if he hadn't been sick. So I'm not asking for a change in that, just I wish that it had been handled a little differently. It would have made more sense for me, first of all, for Micah to have been killed by Arthur, and then for Arthur to begin the steps to take his agency back. And yes, I said agency because the way that I see it, just like John, I feel like the way that they were raised by Dutch was more brainwashing and programming than it was, I feel bad for these guys. I'm going to do the best I can for them, even though I don't live the best, and they're going to see that. But I genuinely care about them. It was more, they were means to an end for him. They were tools for him. And because of that, I do feel like, just like with an abusive relationship or a toxic parent, when you're raised that way, you may do things of your own accord, and you should be held responsible for your own actions still. But there also is a chokehold on your agency because your worldview is not organic and your thoughts are not all your own, if that makes sense. And to reiterate, yes, he should have been the one to kill Micah. Because I feel between Sadie, Charles, and John, and even Dutch, Arthur lost the most to him. And yes, Dutch had a part in it, but due to the first game, I didn't expect Arthur to kill Dutch, and I didn't really want him to because I did like their last conversation. That hurt so bad. And because of that, the tone of that last conversation, I don't think Arthur would have killed Dutch, in that moment anyways, even if he could have. And I think that's great because that goes into what I'm going to say about John and the epilogue in a minute. But there's no reason that Micah couldn't have been killed then. Not only did Arthur deserve that at that point, but we still could have had the ending between Dutch and Arthur if he had done that. Then instead of having Arthur die, alone on a mountain, we could have seen him take his life in his own hands for the first time, being Sans Dutch's brainwashing, and cutting ties with the gang. He ends one of his main problems with Micah, and the gang is pretty much done, in Arthur's own words. Again, I'm not asking for some magic fairy to fly in and take the TB, but rather that he goes off and lives on his own terms before his end. Maybe take up Hamish's cabin. I mean, Hamish is dead, so it's just sitting there, just hunt and fish until it was over. Or go stay with Charlotte. Something that showed he lived his last days away from that life. And that he made good on his change. And that he did redeem himself. And he kept along the path of change until the end. He still would have passed on. So it doesn't undermine anything. But in my humble opinion, it adds to it. It would be like, yes, he falls to this disease that he got due to his actions of serving Dutch and serving the gang. But in the end, he did make that change. And he took his life in his own hands, and he lived what was left of it on his own terms. And it also, this is really what makes me desire this, is that it would have given us a taste of something different than the first game. Which I saw was a criticism from some folks about the game, and I'm inclined to agree. My personal view is that while it was sad and it was impactful, no doubt, it had cliche undertones to it that made it my least favorite part of the game. Or at least close to the epilogue, which possibly is my least favorite part of the game. It was obvious Dutch wasn't going to die if you've played the first game, and it was obvious Arthur wasn't going to kill him, which, like I said, that's fine. But where I believe they dropped the ball with the epilogue is a little bit of what I said in the ending. It's Micah. Now, full disclosure, a decent portion of why I didn't like the epilogue is because I'm biased. I'll admit that. And I love Arthur's character. Now, I love John too. I played the first game religiously. And I love John and always will, but I didn't expect for Arthur to surpass him for me. He is the absolute best fictional character I've ever seen. And this, again, could be out of bias, but it was hard to watch the epilogue and see them living the life that I felt Arthur deserved, that was bought with his blood. Everyone just being so happy off the work of Arthur's back was just, it grated my very being. It just danced all over already raw nerves and emotions. They all did the same things, but it just seemed like he paid the worst, or paid the most. Now, I can step back and look objectively at my views on this. Perhaps that's what they were going for. Maybe they wanted you to feel a sense of him being extremely wronged. Maybe they wanted it to hurt, to have this bright and colorful contrast, this bright and colorful juxtaposition against what you just saw before you enter the epilogue. That possibility isn't lost on me. That being said, I still believe what I believe about Micah. The whole hunting Micah down mess shouldn't have been a thing in the epilogue. I just didn't feel the drive to go after him. It felt more like a chore. Because this dude should have been had his wig split. Like, this isn't something I should have had to handle at that point in the game. And I would have preferred if Sadie came and told you about leads on Dutch, and that be who you pursue. That could have opened up all types of dialogue between Charles, John, and Sadie about, is it worth it to go after this guy? What are we going after this guy for? Just having debates amongst each other to figure out where everybody stands and see differing viewpoints about revenge, and should that be what's going on here. And you could have had all the same conversations and troubles between John and Abigail, and is it worth it, and you're putting this before your family. We could have had all of that still. It would have been better to have him go after Dutch thinking, I can finally end all this, but then he gets there and it's like, oh, no, I can't. I think that would give more credence to the whole Dutch's sons part of the lore, which is that, he raised Arthur and he raised John, and they are like his kids, and that's why he has this magnetic hold over them. It's a deep hold that makes sense about why it's so hard for both of these guys, two grown men, to not just be able to walk away, or at least put him down the way that they've put down countless others. Because he raised them, it makes sense that they keep stumbling when it comes to him. It took really extreme behavior on his end for them to even realize that he wasn't who he said he was, and that something was wrong in everything. So I think it would make perfect sense to have John think that enough time had passed in the epilogue that he could kill Dutch, only to get there and realize, nope, still see you as daddy. It might have been cliche. It might have been cliche to have a shootout and walk away. But it could have been like in the first game where Dutch could have easily killed John, but just shot near him instead. If John would have confronted him, that could have been the moment where, after he walks away, he truly starts his own path to redemption. Not just to make Abigail shut up, not just to be something respectable in Jack's eyes, but also severing ties from a dark period of his lifetime for himself. We did get a deeper glimpse into John's mind with the journal and conversations that he had in the epilogue, and he did put the work and time in to start a new life. So I don't want to say that they didn't show anything towards John, taking that path to redemption or starting his own path. But I just felt like it would also make the first game's storyline that much more impactful because he has to shake that genuine foundation of change in order to start mirroring his own self by government command. All in all, these are just my opinions. It does not change the fact that I can safely say Red Dead Redemption 2 is the best game I've played to date. I don't feel that's hype. I don't think a bad game could produce this level of commentary from me. Not to toot my own horn or anything, it's more just how much thought I've put into this. And that's only because I was given such platinum tier quality to even delve into and think about. And there's so much more to discuss, but these are the things that stood out to me the most, and I just thought I would share them. So thanks for hanging out. Let me know if you feel differently or if you want to expand on what I said or you have something new to add. Let's discuss.